We are going to continue to talk about the Cleveland Browns offense. Obviously, so much changes made to the coaching personnel. So a lot of changes going to come to the skill personnel. We got Ian Valentino from the OBR in here. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. We are joined today by Ian Valentino, new part of the OBR. Keep growing over there. You guys know how I feel about those guys. And obviously, just adding more and more. Get your eyes, your ears on everything over at the OBR. I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. If you're not part of the everyday crowd by now, change that quick. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. As I mentioned, Ian Valentino joining us here from the OBR at NFL Draft Study. Maybe a change in the name over the years, but I'm sure you're all familiar with Ian's work. Ian, obviously, and I think so many people figuring the way the Browns season went, obviously, closing out strong, what the overall record was, getting to the playoffs. But this offense had been together for 4 years. And, you never want to see anybody lose jobs. And obviously, luckily, and thankfully, most of those guys are obviously moving on. But there comes a time where, we've done what we can do. And, whether it's, a change for change's sake or realizing that the group collectively has probably gone as far as they could, it was time. And, again, whether you believe what Albert Breer's saying or not, none of that matters, guys. This offense, and looking at teams that are still playing, looking at teams that went further than the Browns in the playoffs, offensively, they're just better. So the Browns need to add to that. And Kevin Stefanski, to himself, obviously, you have to change your spots at some point. And for him, I think it's kind of that scenario playing out.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I think this was really a matter of like, hey, look, the league has changed since Kevin Stefanski took the job, right? We've seen offenses evolve. We've seen Mike McDaniel come in. We've seen the Ravens totally overdid their offense with Monken. And we've seen more of a priority instead of seeing quarterbacks extend the plays, take more of the Superman pads on their shoulders. We're starting to see offenses get back a little bit more balanced. We're starting to see more formation-based looks. Motion is still a thing, but I think that the motion has been a little bit overrated to a point where, you know what, we actually have to throw different personnel and get more out of the personnel with more diverse personnel as opposed to misdirection, because we kept seeing it in the playoffs. Some of these misdirection-based teams, they'd get to the postseason, then all of a sudden they're hitting a wall, because it's just like playoff basketball where it's like, okay, like this works, but like you still need to have like the star. And so I think that what Cleveland's done, and it's going to be interesting to see with Ken Dorsey most importantly, right? Because he's going to be in the spotlight more than anybody. What did he learn with Josh Allen? What did he take away from that situation as far as his successes and his maybe failures? And that's okay to say. What does he bring to this offense to say, we've got a potential star quarterback here. We've got an offense that's loaded all around. And we've got an offensive line that, when healthy, is arguably one of the best in the league. So I think it is a change. I don't think it's just a change for change's sake. I think it's more of we've been together for a while. The league has changed. Let's adapt now before after the 2024 season. Because at that point, if next year doesn't go well for XYZ reasons, and this team survived despite so much going wrong last year, if things don't go well next year, then we're all really facing questions that we don't want to face. Go ahead and take that lateral. Go ahead and take that position. We're just going to freshen things up around here. I think that's totally fine.
And for this offense, for the most part of the Kevin Stefanski regime, what was the strong point of this offense was the running game in Nick Chubb and the offensive line. There is nobody who has any idea what Nick Chubb can actually do for this team in 2024. As much as we all love him, this is a major hurdle for him to try to come back from. The other thing that was really, really always strong for this team was our offensive line play. Yes, some of it was obviously injury hit. But look, Joel Bitonio, as much as we all love him, he's not getting any younger. Wyatt Teller going into the last year of his deal. You got to figure out the tackle situation. It's not all bad necessarily because obviously there's 3 guys, but 2 starting spots, and you kind of got to figure that out. But it's never truly been, necessarily about the quarterback in the passing game. That was supposed to change in 2023. Unfortunately, they never got to it. And I think we thought we were going to get to it because once Nick went down, it's like, okay, there's no way they can backtrack and just make Nick Chubb the feature anymore because he's not here. Then you lost your quarterback, obviously, and then that whole carousel and made it through it. That's fine. But you can't just because you pulled Joe Flacco off of his couch and he had a miraculous 5-week run, just say, okay, well, this is the way that was luck. It wasn't supposed to happen, and most likely wasn't supposed to work out that way. But now they have to get down to brass tacks and finding out just who they can bring in the building. And whether or not you believe in Deshaun Watson or not, the Browns in 2024 have no choice. This offense has to run through Deshaun Watson, and they're going to do everything they can to hedge that bet that it is going to work.
Yeah. I mean, they have to make it work, period, or else it's a new regime. And that's really what it comes down to. And we don't want this regime to not work out, right? Because they've done so much that's really, really good. The drafting's been great. The coaching, I think, has been phenomenal. You've got probably should be at least a 2-time coach of the year.
All the stink is off the main name of Cleveland Browns.
Right? Like, I mean, this team is on the up and up. Like we entered the season and I said, like, I think the Browns are the team. Like, I think that's your sleeper Super Bowl team. This roster is strong on both sides. Jim Schwartz coming in. A lot of that bore out despite so much going wrong. And yeah, the season didn't end with a playoff victory, which stinks. But look at how much the team accomplished. It was such a fun year, the way they rallied. There's so much to build off of now. But you're right. It's like you have to go all in on Deshaun because it doesn't work anyways if you don't. So you might as well just continue to build around that. And I think that they've shown that. Like even last year's signings, some of them that didn't work out, like Marquise Goodwin, stuff like that was no one's fault. But the mindset was there, right? The process was there. And I think this is just a continuation of saying, like, our process is really good. And eventually it's going to lead to even better results. And we started to see that on the field last year, even more.
And, and there, like the Marquise Goodwin is a good one because there were just so many of these guys they've tried, and hey, can we spend budget and maybe, bank on it and it works out for us? And almost for 4 years now, it's never has. It's never worked out, which makes for a great segue because we are going to start shifting here to segment 2. The draft wide receiver class is loaded. There are going to be obviously free agents available, and this isn't going to be about waiting on anybody anymore. They're going to throw 6-7 guys in the pool, and the first 3 or 4 out are going to be the ones going to play. And it's not going to be about what you did in the past. It's not going to be where you were drafted. It's not going to think about what you think you can be one day. Best people are going to play, and they're going to put themselves in the position to have a room where it's going to decide basically for itself. We're going to continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns, the OBRs, Ian Valentino in. Everybody stick around. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drivers and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen information center. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your adventure. The 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced availability and 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 5,000 pounds of towing capacity. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. We continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns, joined by Ian Valentino, part of 247's the OBR. Obviously, beefing up for the season. Great get for the OBR. Certainly great opportunity for Ian to continue with his draft work. Now, obviously, Mobile in the books, and now we're going to start to look to late February, early March, as we, continue to our guys trying to, fill in boxes, check in boxes, and put in that perfect, tape production, all-star games, combine. Ian, I've always been a guy that absolutely loves to talk wide receivers, my former position. And I think just the growth of the position, and probably even over the last decade, where we talk about kids who caught 100 passes in a season in high school, just absolutely blows my mind. But this is the evolution of the position, and this is why you get guys hitting the ground running as quickly as they do. All different types, certainly in this class. A lot of guys who can contribute vertically, which is what I think is a big part for this Browns team, because the one thing the Joe Flacco run showed you is that was one part of this Browns offense that has never existed consistently during the Kevin Stefanski regime, was a vertical passing attack. And now that they've seen it, it's kind of, a little bit junky, like, well, now that I've had a taste of it, I definitely need more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be right. Like you have to be able to create chunk plays, and look at what Deshaun did in Houston, and some of that's not going to be replicated because there's not a DeAndre Hopkins here right now, or literally DeAndre Hopkins. He's not here right now, and for as good as Amari Cooper is, right? Like unless if Hopkins comes, you have to tailor this receiving unit to Deshaun's strengths. He's not someone that generally trusts a receiver no matter what. Like he wants to see separation. He wants to see guys running to space. He wants to see a little bit of room, a little bit of breathing room, and that's for better or for worse, right? Like Joe was just willing to say, hey, Kevin, what are you telling me to do? I'm going to be a robot, and I'm going to go out there. I'm going to grip it and rip it, whether it's the right read or not, whether it's the right throw or not. We're just doing it. And that has good things and it has bad times too, right? Like you want someone that can probably do a little bit more. And Deshaun, I think we know he can do a little bit more than that. It's just getting him comfortable in the way that he was comfortable with Will Fuller, someone that he was trusting to say, you can make a big play downfield a lot of the times. Now, there's not really, a Fuller type, and there might be someone that's better overall than Fuller, but just more so from like someone that brings that explosiveness and earned his trust. And I think that this class is going to offer the opportunity to do that. I know some folks want guys with size, some folks want speed, and this class offers a little bit of both. There's not a lot of guys where the Browns are going to be picking that have both, but that doesn't mean that someone's not going to be really good. We know Puka Nacua last year. I heard Daniel Jeremiah say, like, look, this guy was going to be a second-round pick last year if it wasn't for all the health issues. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe Cleveland can find their version of that in this draft. There's no one that pops off the radar that to me that's like a fifth rounder that would be like that. But if you would have asked me a year ago, I probably would have said Nacua was a third rounder anyways. So like there's always opportunities, and you really just have to find someone that's the right fit. And I think that's probably like a true number two receiver. Obviously, if you can find a true number one in day two, you're going to take it. But that's extremely difficult, and it's hard to find and project that. But if you can get even like a really good number two, maybe slide Elijah Moore back into the slot or keep him outside as a vertical threat, you just kind of have to find everyone's right role, right? I think that's the number one thing is like, who's going to be that guy that really pulls this unit fully in together and puts a little bow on top because it's close. Cedric Tillman, I like him a lot. Is he going to be that, guy who takes over for Cooper? Is he going to be like that true number two? I don't know, but you got to keep throwing assets at the position until you find someone that sticks.
Yeah, and and that was even a thing because obviously you saw, with the vertical game being as consistent as it was, everybody always said the same thing about David Njoku throughout the process. Everybody always had hope for him is well, safeties can't cover him. He's too big. Linebackers can't run with him. And guess what? Once safeties had to drop back and it was linebackers or it was, strong safeties, guess what? David Njoku ate like, a chubby guy on Thanksgiving. And it was just that simple. The Browns need to continue that as well. But Ian, obviously, we're going to have to beat you up. We got to get some names here, a couple fits that you think you like or just guys in general you think that could work for the Browns.
Yeah, so guys, I think that are like number two types who can play inside or outside. This draft actually has a couple of them that I really, really like. Ladd McConkey's number one. I don't know if he falls to the Browns in the second round.
The thing with Ladd McConkey, I think, is everybody loves him, but let's all be honest. When he runs, that's when all bets are going to be solidified because it's going to come down to that number. It's sad, but it's going to.
Yep. It is, and I think it's going to be fast. I think it's going to be fast enough that he's going to go too high for Cleveland. So I think they'll pivot. Then you start looking at like the Malachi Corleys, someone who's a little bit more like Debo Samuel, but he's quick. He's got really good size. He's got experience in the slot. Do they want someone that's a little bit more of a weapon or more of a receiver? If they go more of a receiver, then you're looking at the Roman Wilsons. I think he's going to probably cost that second round pick. If you don't want to spend that expensive price, you're talking Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. Catches everything in sight, not the fastest guy in the world, but he's quick, great hands. Do you want someone maybe that's more of a downfield burner? Jamari Thrash would probably be my guy out of Louisville, looking at that third to fourth round. He lacks a little bit of size, 5'11", 185-ish. So he's got size, but he's not like the big dude. And then one of my favorites in this class, he's a smaller guy. He's a slot guy, Jacob Cowing. Now, my concern with Cowing is, can he take the volume? Is he going to be your downfield guy, or is he more of a complementary piece in like the fourth or fifth round? I'd love him in this unit. And same, I mean, even like a guy like, who maybe fits the mold of this bigger receiver with speed, like Brendan Rice. It's like at the right price, I like it. I wouldn't overspend on those types though, because those guys don't necessarily, to me, have either the tape. In Rice's instance, I don't think he's a great football player. I think he's a good athlete who plays receiver. Cowing, he's just a small guy. And generally those smaller guys aren't going to be, playing 85% of snaps. And so this draft has a lot of guys who can fill certain roles, but I'm really banking on like that Pearsall, Corley, Wilson, Thrash. Like if you can get one of those guys, I think you've got a guy who could potentially be a really solid role player right now and then develop down the road.
Oh, yeah, there's no question. There is. I mean, obviously there is, a lot of options. And again, they have to hit this and hit this hard. I truly think they're going to be active in free agency. I think they're going to be active and at least take one receiver here in the draft. And and part of it, and it's interesting that the one coach that did stay is still Chad O'Shea, that is still here, because if you're talking about, development with players, the wide receiver room, the one that really developed was the 6th round pick, Donovan Peoples-Jones. But other than that, they really haven't gotten that. I think David Bell has done a couple of nice things, obviously. Tillman, for Tillman, I give him a pass because I don't know how, as a rookie wide receiver, you go out there and play, and every time you turn around, it is a different quarterback. Because where you're standing is as at the 3rd, 4th wide receiver, whatever he is extremely difficult, obviously, to turn around and, okay, well, this week, because everybody's doing things differently, well, he's going to release the ball here. It's going to be from this angle. His steps are this, his drops are this. Really difficult spot to be in. But they need to juice up this room. Because, Jerome Ford, I think some people are down on what Jerome did. I think he did a pretty good job, but without knowing what Nick can give you, it is going to be about throwing the ball. And yes, you're talking about a team that's definitely, looking to throw the ball probably north of 450 times a year. No question.
Yeah. And like, how do you balance these needs too? Like, I would say I like Ford. I think what he did was fine, but you may need a second back. Like, you may need to add another backup because you mentioned like Chubb, we just don't know. And because we don't know about Chubb, well, then how much do you want to invest in that? Because if you invest a 2nd round pick in receiver, do you want to invest the 3rd round pick or 4th round pick in a running back? Like, those are really tough decisions when you don't have a ton of draft capital. And like, this is not the best running back class. I think there's some really good backs in this class, but other teams are also going to think that. And other teams also have running back needs, so that might push guys up further than what we thought. It's a tough balance to play, and it's not like these rooms aren't talented. And I think that's part of it. It's like when you already have guys that can play, you now have to find the right guy to play. It's not like the rebuilding years. The rebuilding years, you were just looking for talent. We'll find guys that fit our mantra, and it's going to be fine. They're going to see the field eventually. Now it's a little bit different because there's so many roles that are already accounted for.
No question. And, and like all this talk about, oh, well, even if you say, well, the Browns don't have a 1st round pick, well, that's okay. They're the Browns. They're 2nd round, they're 3rd round, they're 4th. These guys will all start anyway. It is not the case anymore. And it's really even more weird to talk about the Cleveland Browns that whoever they draft is not going to start. That's the craziest part. The Browns draft depth now. It's just a crazy thing to say. Certainly, as my everydayers know, from where the infancy of this show started to where we are now. Yeah, it is really, really crazy to say all that. We're going to get segment 3 here. We're going to talk some offensive line, because you bring in a new offensive line coach, you bring in an assistant offensive line coach. Obviously, you want to give these guys, a couple guys to bring in for them who they think they can groom. We're going to get to that. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Everybody, stick around. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. Closing it out here, your latest Locked On Browns, the OBR's Ian Valentino joins your host here, Jeff Lloyd. As you all know, I appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. If you're not part of the everyday crowd by now, make a new plan, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Ian, just going through, and obviously we're starting to get to the point where we get top 100 boards, top 200 boards. I mean, I've seen some 25 offensive tackles, 13, 14, 15 guards. This is a class, and whether or not the Browns start to loosen up some of what they normally do as far as age restriction, things like that, and they may be forced to just because the way, obviously, the NCAA has gone. But the funniest thing is the Browns always had deep depth at offensive line. And the 1 year they needed it, which was this year, was the year they essentially didn't have it. But some of these guys are getting older, obviously injury prone. And when you bring in new coaches to a positional room, obviously you want them to go try to find some guys for themselves, guys they can groom. This is a class. This is a really good class.
It's a fantastic class. And you mentioned even like the guards, like a lot of these guys are going to be moving from tackle to guard. We have that every single year. Maybe the guys who measure in at like 6'3" or 6'4" don't quite have like the arm length that NFL prefers, and that's okay. Or the athleticism. Some guys get exposed for that too. It's really, really hard to play tackle. But this Browns team did great considering those limitations, especially, those roster limitations. No one expected anyone half the line to get hurt any given moment. And so for them to be able to coach up the guys that they did to play relatively well enough is an ode and a really, really promising thing for the future. Even with Bill Callahan going to Tennessee, I don't think that it's going to be a huge drop off to the guy who's next, right? Like I think who's next is really a mantra that every successful franchise that has to take on. I think the Browns are going to embrace that and be okay. And so what I'm looking at for this team is like, number one, how do you want to address left tackle? Is Jedrick Wills your guy's if he's your guy long term, then that changes the conversation a little bit. If he's someone that you want to invest in on a 4 year deal, coming off an injury, obviously they got a little bit of time on that, but that question's coming sooner than later. If he's not the guy, then maybe a left tackle's in the conversation with that second round pick. It's a little bit tougher to know who exactly is going to be on the board because I could see like 7 first round tackles in this class. Like it's that good, and someone's going to fall into the second.
But it's round. One or the other though. So if the offensive tackle runs, it may help the wide receiver position. The wide receiver runs could help the offensive tackle position, of course.
Exactly. So you have to be flexible. And so you have to like the front office is going to have that conversation to say like, how desperate are we to address either need? And of course, free agency may clear up some of that, right? Like if you go out in free agency and you grab a really solid speedy guy or even a big guy, whatever they want to fulfill, then you can go in the draft and say, okay, maybe Kingsley Suamatea out of BYU, like he'd be a really great fit if he falls to you in the second round. Or do we want kind of to mirror our tackle situation? We got DeJuan Jones long-term at right tackle. Do we want another monstrous, powerful left tackle like Patrick Paul out of Houston? I could see that. Like you're starting to make a little bit of sense there. Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame might be someone in the middle rounds. Now he played right tackle. He didn't play left tackle as Joe Alt was there, but Fisher was super impressive. A guy who's a third-year sophomore. He's got the athleticism to really succeed at tackle. I think you could swing him over at left tackle if you want him to be there long-term. Help him develop, get a little bit of strength there. He's going to have to get a little bit more experience, but the physical skill set is there. If it's not as much of a priority, if you're not looking at like round 2, Javon Foster didn't have a great Senior Bowl week. Can that push him into the third round? I think it might. A little bit light in the pants, but he's pretty athletic, good in the run game. It's just going to be time. It's going to be reps. It's going to be functional strength. A lot of these guys are going to face similar type of criticism because they're about to face grown men for the first time in their life. It's a little bit different when you're playing TJ Watt than when you're going against, Billy Two Shoes against Kansas. No offense, because Kansas actually had some really good talent this last year, and they're going to be a good team next year. But a little bit different competition. Even if you look at like Ladarius Henderson out of Michigan, I thought he had a good second half of the season last year. 310 pounds, 6'4". I think he could be a solid mid-round addition. Or do you go even day 3? But someone like this has to be added, right? Like you have to continue to pump in talent into that room because you just don't know when those injuries are coming. I mean, like Oklahoma's Walter Rouse. He played at Stanford for a few years, was former 5-star. He's more of a pass blocker. He's pretty smooth, but he's got, doesn't have that elite athleticism. So do you want a swing tackle who's going to be a high-end backup, or do you want someone that's really going to develop? Because if you want a developmental guy, you kind of have to take the swing on the traits and then hope that he doesn't play for a year or two. And that's the weird part of offensive line play. It's just there's just not high-end quality guys. And when there are, they go top 10.
It is just the way it works. But the Browns, and I'm looking because it was fun. Like as much as we did last year, and it was defense. And that has to be a lot of, what went into obviously the last couple of weeks. What the Browns done is, well, if we attack our offense the way we attacked our defense last year, hopefully we're going to get that same type of return of investment. Ian Valentino was great, guys. Appreciate him joining us here. Make sure you're following at NFL Draft Study. Check out all the work, obviously, over at the OBR. I'll always tell you, check out everything out at the OBR. But Ian obviously jumping in here, help the guys out, and you'll get some draft content pushed out. So make sure you're checking all of that out. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. Again, the everyday crowd, they'll tell you, if you're not part of this by now, that is on you. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.